Hello, everyone. Welcome to This Week in Mormons, the Twin Sisters edition, with your hosts, Ariane Smith
and Tiffany Hales.
It is May. We're here for our monthly contribution.
Do you realize it was 6 years ago when we first started podcasting for TWIM? It was May.
It was May?
It was May.
This is our anniversary?
Because this is so our anniversary. Although when we first started 6 years ago, we did it early in May. And I think our first episode was only like 20 minutes because we had no idea what we were doing. We were just submitting it to Jeff to see if he'd even consider us. I don't know if I've ever gone back and listened to it, and I think it would probably be frightening
to listen to that.
to listen to it. But I do remember because I think one of the things we talked about, because it was the month of May, and we talk about this repeatedly every year in the month of May.
It's a tradition.
Mother's Day.
Mother's Day. We have to start off.
We have lots of thoughts.
We have to start off talking about Mother's Day.
Yes.
Okay, so here's my thought on Mother's Day this year.
Okay.
My ward did what it's done since COVID times, which is a lovely cookie this year from Twisted Sugar. I am on board 100%. Love the cookie. Give me the cookie.
Okay.
Not a plant, not lotion.
Was it like a sugar cookie?
You could choose sugar or chocolate chip in your own little box on your way out of church.
Nice.
But this is the funny thing about my ward. You know how we forgot it was Easter?
Yes.
And we tried to sing Pioneer hymns? And we didn't have Easter talks?
Well, you tried to sing praise to the man. Yes. That's not a pioneer hymn.
That's a pre-pioneer.
It's a pre-pioneer hymn.
So I think they maybe overcompensated for Mother's Day.
Oh, really?
Because we sang, of course, like Love at Home and Teach Me to Walk in the Light.
Uh-huh.
We had two speakers whose talks were all on mothers. And of course, we had the primary children sing.
Yes.
But then I went to Relief Society. I'm in primary, but they sent us who would like to go to Relief Society for Mother's Day. And in Relief Society, our lesson was nothing to do with mothers. It was all about like the Savior and like, following him and comparing like Moroni 7 to one of President Nelson's recent talks. It was very, very good. Such a good lesson. And at the end of the lesson, I realized I have cracked the code on Mother's Day. I figured out how to solve all of our church problems on Mother's Day.
Oh, I am waiting with bated breath here. You didn't post this on the Facebook page because
I didn't.
For those of you who are interested, on Mother's Day, I posted a picture of what my ward did and asked people on Facebook to engage and tell me what their wards did for Mother's Day. So tell me how you have cracked the code.
I've cracked the code. Okay. If we could follow this formula, I believe it would solve 90% of our Mother's Day issues at church.
Okay.
It would prevent people from walking on landmines.
I'm all for preventing landmines on Mother's Day.
Here's what you keep. You keep the kids singing, the primary kids singing.
Okay.
Because every mom wants to see that.
And everybody wants to see that because let's face it, they're entertaining.
Any day the kids sing is a good day.
Exactly.
Doesn't matter what holiday, what they're singing, it's a good day.
Exactly.
Keep the kids singing. Keep the treat, whatever your treat is.
Yeah.
If it's, if you're a sugar lover like us, hopefully you're getting a cookie or something delicious. I know that's not for everyone, but I hope you're not getting a plant or lotion.
No kidding.
So keep the kids singing. Keep the treat. Everything else needs to be like a normal meeting. No Mother's Day themed hymns.
Okay.
No Mother's Day themed talks, no Mother's Day themed lessons. You carry about your business as usual. Have a mission farewell, sure, but don't let them talk about their mom, or don't tell them to talk about their mom. Give them a topic that is not mother related. Have a mission farewell. Have a high council come speak, not on mothers. Have whoever you want to speak, youth speakers, anybody, whoever normally would speak, have them speak, not on mothers.
Okay,
don't you think that would solve like majority of our issues?
Well, it certainly would, because we had a variety of Mother's Day talks. We had a youth talk, a sister had to talk on Mother's Day, and then one of our new counselors in the bishopric spoke on Mother's Day. Mm-hmm. Here's what was really interesting, which I noted, and I'm probably going to get in trouble with everybody in my ward who listens to this. So the teenager who spoke did a really good job of being all-inclusive. Mm-hmm. The mom who spoke did a really good job being all-inclusive. The counselor who spoke really focused on traditional mom. Mm-hmm. And which again, I think that's where you have the potential to run into landmines where people don't fit the box of traditional mom. And so, yes, I do kind of have to agree with you that, doing a small acknowledgement, but not making a huge deal.
Right.
And
I think moms are okay with that.
I think moms are okay with that. And the other thing too that I liked that you told me that they did is you got a Sunday off. You didn't have to go teach primary. Right. You got to go into Relief Society. You had a lesson that was all about the Savior in Relief Society. So you got to be spiritually filled in Relief Society without any landmines of mom guilt.
Yes. So I think this needs to be the model going forward. I think moms would be on board as long as they hear their kids sing.
Exactly.
And they get a little treat. That's all we need. We don't need the talks to be about us.
Well, exactly. And you know what? I think that makes a lot of sense. Just as long as your ward gets back on board with Easter and quits having mission farewells on Easter.
Now,
and
Easter
actually talks about the Savior on Easter.
Easter, let's go all in. Mother's Day, let's just rein it back a little.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Well, my ward did what we've done. This is the second year in a row that we've done this. And admittedly, the Relief Society had a coup last year and took over Mother's Day from the ward.
I think this is hilarious.
Because we were like, we would like our sisters to have what they want, not what the men think we need. So yes, it is a lot of work for the Relief Society presidency, but my sisters all felt loved. So what we ended up doing, and this is in all likelihood probably my last Mother's Day. I will have been in the Relief Society presidency 3 years come January. So I suspect that this will be my last year doing Mother's Day. And I have no idea what if they'll continue this tradition next year. But because we had because we had church at noon, we did a little boxed lunch. And so inside the boxed lunch, we had a chicken salad sandwich on a croissant. We had a chocolate dipped strawberry, and we had a cookie. And then we had bottles of water. And so all of the men took over all the auxiliaries. All of the women went into the gym. We had a very short video message that on mothers, well, not on mothers, it was actually on women in general and the value of women in general. That was a video message that included Camilla Kimball and statements by Camilla Kimball and then statements by President Nelson. And then we sat around and visited.
Well, that's always fun.
And I like that.
I know
really
not
nice.
Everybody likes that, but I like to visit. But also I'm in primary, so I don't get to visit very often.
Exactly. And that's what we felt our sisters wanted, is just the opportunity to visit. And we did make them get up and switch groups and circles, because we set up 6 circles and we made them twice get up and switch groups and circles so that then they were forced to interact with other people. So that's what we did. It was lovely. It was interesting in reading through the Facebook comments, lots of like chocolates, cookies, things like that. So it sounds like, most moms got a little bit of love thrown at them on Mother's Day, and nothing too outrageous. At least nobody in the Facebook comments was like, yeah, I was completely offended at church today.
Well, we'll have to report back in June on what our wards do for Father's Day.
Yes. Well, I already know what my ward's going to do because, again, the Relief Society sisters
are in charge. Fun.
But that's okay. The men seem to be far less picky about what happens on Father's Day than the women are about what happens on Mother's Day.
Yes, they are. And if there are talks about dad in sacrament meeting, half the dads probably won't even hear them. They might be snoozing.
So
sorry, was that rude? So, I totally fine. I mean, we had a dad that was always snoozing in church.
Even when he was on the stand. I mean,
honestly, now I struggle.
Yeah.
I get like, if it's warm, it's a little sleepy.
Yeah.
I'm exhausted. It's easy.
I get it. So all right. Well, anything else, or should we head on into our stories?
Let's get into some stories. Okay, the first thing we have to talk is the people on Instagram would like to hear your take on the Valo trial. I know it wrapped up last week, so they briefly hit on it in last week's episode.
They did. But I have to say, the gentleman who covered last week's episode clearly did not follow this trial very carefully, because there was a whole lot they got wrong. But that's okay. I won't hold that against them, because I knew we were recording this week and I would set the record straight. So one of the things that they kept talking about is they kept saying, oh, her beliefs were so different than mainstream church, which is really true. But the thing is they were so interwoven, and you did not understand how interwoven they were unless you were following the evidence of the trial.
Well, I think the thing that shocked me the most about the trial, I mean, other than the horrific, the deaths.
Yeah.
The one thing that really shocked me that came out in the trial was that she was going to the temple up until, I was like,
seriously?
I had no idea. Before this trial started, I just assumed
people had died.
I just assumed that they were a fringe group doing their own thing that had kind of separated. But in the trial, it came out, oh no, they were half in, half out. They had their fringe group, but they were also going to the temple, like our actual temple.
Yeah, like she and Chad together. At the temple.
At the Rexburg temple. It's just mind-blowing.
Well, it wasn't only Rexburg. There were several other temples that they hit.
Oh, mind-blowing.
And they must have subpoenaed the church in some form because they knew the dates and times that Lori and Chad had gone to the temple and the temples that they had gone to. And literally within less than a few minutes of Lori scanning her recommend, Chad is scanning his. And so, it was all sorts of crazy. So yes, the verdict was a week ago today, which I'm thinking back and I'm like, wow, a week ago. It seems like it was much longer than that, but it really was only a week ago. She was found guilty on all 6 counts. So she was charged with 2 counts of grand theft for stealing the Social Security money of Tylee and stealing the Social Security money of JJ. She was charged with conspiracy and grand theft in the death of Tylee and conspiracy and grand theft in the death of Tylee or JJ. She was charged with conspiracy for murder with Tammy and then first-degree murder for Tylee and JJ. So all 6 counts she was found guilty on. I have to say, as I listened to the evidence in this trial, and I followed this very carefully, we've talked in the past, Nate Eaton, I listened to his show every night. I kind of have been going through Nate Eaton withdrawals this week because I listened to it for 4 weeks solid. I'm like, what do I listen to now? Anyway, so as I'm following this evidence, I was fairly convinced that she was going to be found guilty of the grand theft. I was very convinced that she was likely to be found guilty of the conspiracy. I just wasn't sure on the first-degree murder charges, what the jurors would do on that.
Is that why they're separate charges? Because, I mean, it kind of sounds the same, right? Conspiracy to commit murder and first-degree murder. It's kind of the same thing. But they separate them out.
There are different elements of each crime. And so the prosecution has to prove the elements of each crime beyond a reasonable doubt. And so the elements to prove conspiracy are a lot less than the elements to prove actual first-degree murder. So and that's why I was like, up until about the last day of the trial, I was just like, oh, I don't know if they're going to get their first-degree murder or not. But what the prosecutors did that was really, really, really smart is they saved this FBI agent. His name was Doug Hart, and they saved him as one of their final witnesses. And he really brought it home because what he did is his specialty was going through all of these text messages that Chad and Lori and Alex were, flying back and forth between them. And he was able to go through those text messages kind of in a chronological order. And they, of course, cherry picked and pulled out the good ones. And when you looked at them and heard his testimony in a chronological order, you were like, oh, this is so very, very clear that this was well orchestrated and well planned by both of them. And it really just was a great witness to kind of wrap it up and bring it home. So after he testified, I was like, yeah, I think she's going to be found guilty on everything. So I do have a few thoughts both on the trial itself and on the closing argument. So one of the things that came out in the trial that I just found hilarious was there was a nickname for Chad's manliness.
No.
The nickname for his manliness was the Storm. So
that is insane.
He sends this text message to Lori that says, "Grab me by the storm and I will follow you to the end of the universe."
Ew.
And then they asked the witness, what is he referencing with the storm? And the witness was very, very less graphic than I'm going to be on this podcast, and explained what it was. And apparently then there was an audible gasp in the courtroom.
Oh, no.
But here's the best part. The attorneys in their closing arguments referenced the storm. And I was like, oh, no, they didn't. And I was like, oh, yes, they did. So in closing arguments, the prosecutor goes first, Rob Wood, excuse me. He does not say anything about the storm in his initial closing argument. Then Archibald, who is her defense attorney, gets up. And before I go on to say what he says about the storm, I need to do a little sidebar here and talk about something that happened during his closing argument. Several times during his closing argument, he references Chad's books, and he calls them Chad's stupid little books. And he says that several times.
Her attorney does.
Her attorney does. Mm-hmm. This really upset her. Like, she is kind of almost nearly emotionless during this trial. But you call her husband's books stupid? And she was mad.
Okay, that's interesting, because didn't the attorneys kind of like try to separate them? Like,
yeah. In fact, her attorney in closing argument tried to make it look like this was all orchestrated by Chad, and she was just following Chad.
But clearly, she's still got a thing for Chad.
She clearly still has a thing for Chad, because she did not want her attorney throwing Chad under the bus, and she did not like her attorney calling his books stupid little books.
Wow.
So that's my sidebar on that. That I found that was very interesting how emotional she became about that, when there's all sorts of other testimony that was very graphic that she did not get nearly as emotional at. So here's what Chad's attorney says about the storm, or what Lori's attorney says about the storm in his closing argument. He said, he is referencing Chad, is being led by the storm, not the first guy to be led by the storm.
Oh, he's really talking about
the storm.
He's like, well, we've already established that this is a word, so I'm just going to use this so that I don't have to get too graphic in court.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh.
And then he goes on to make another statement that I don't think was referencing the in-court reference to the storm. He said, if there's anything we've learned about a storm, you have to hide from a storm. You seek shelter from a storm. I don't really understand how he was kind of tying that into his closing argument. But then
he was just trying to throw that word in as much as he could.
Throw that word in as much as possible. So then the prosecutor gets up, because the prosecutor gets to have the last say. And what does the prosecutor do? Oh, he goes back to the storm. And he re-quotes Chad's text about the storm.
Wow.
I'm just like, the Hollywood writers are on strike. Why don't you go write for Hollywood? Because you're doing very well.
Get any weirder.
It really can't.
Well, and now another year from now, and the circus starts again.
Chad's
trial, right?
Although I have some predictions.
Okay.
First of all, Lori will be sentenced probably in about 3 months. And so that's coming up. Also, one of the jurors has spoken to the media, and that juror chose my favorite reporter, Nate Eaton. And so if you want to know what that juror says, because this is only on eastidahonews.com where you can find this. And so if you go to eastidahonews.com, if you go to their YouTube channel, there is a 37-minute interview that Nate Eaton did with this juror. And it was so fascinating to listen to. So,
there's another juror that spoke to KTVB, our local.
Yes.
I didn't watch that one yet.
She was actually an alternate. She didn't actually sit on the jury.
She had to sit through the whole thing.
I am unaware of any other jurors that have spoken to the media. At least nobody has spoken to the nationals, like CBS, ABC, those, maybe some of the court TV shows they have, but I kind of doubt it. So anyway, if you're interested in what the juror had to say, it's an excellent interview. And and my prediction for Chad. I am predicting that come January, February of 2024, that Chad is going to strike a deal with the prosecutors. I don't think we will have a second trial. I think the prosecutors will take death penalty off the table to avoid having to redo this circus another time here in Ada County, because they brought in 60 witnesses. And so they had to pay. Many of those witnesses traveled from out of state. They had to pay for their travel. They had to pay for their lodging. They had to pay expenses. I mean, this was not a cheap process. And so I think that the prosecutors will take death penalty off the table. He will concede to life in prison. He will plead guilty. And I think we will not have another trial. At least that's my prediction now. We'll see if that rings true in a few months.
I kind of hope you're right.
I hope so too.
I would not like to live through this happening again in our courthouse.
No, except it would mean more Nate Eaton for me. You know, I'm a fangirl, Nate.
Well, don't worry. He's in East Idaho. Crazy things happen there all the time. I'm sure he'll be back.
Exactly. No, I think that his coverage of this trial was just outstanding. And I like to see the local news people just really stepping up to the plate and doing a great job and being just on par with anybody on the national level. So,
okay. Next big thing we have to talk about this week is the 60 Minutes episode that featured the church finances. You know what's funny? I think a couple weeks ago when Matt and Melissa podcasted, they were talking about a separate church finance article that was like a couple weeks ago. And I remember them saying, this is not going away anytime soon. Boy, were they right, because here we are again.
I know. And I mean, when I heard that the interview was coming, it made such a big splash the first time around when the church got fined that I didn't think it would have the quote unquote legs, which that's what in the media business, they talk about a story that is kind of snowballing as it has legs. And I thought, we've already done this. And it still has lots of legs. I don't understand. So
it's still going. So this was interesting. So I watched the 60 Minutes. It's like maybe like a 15-minute segment.
Yeah, it's not a long 60 minutes.
And it was not what I thought it would be. I thought it was going to be focused on the SEC and the fines that the church paid earlier this year for having secret hidden funds of money.
Yes.
But it was not. I mean, that was the tiniest bit of it. This was the whistleblower that came out a couple of years ago. His last name is Nielsen. Now I can't remember David Nielsen.
David.
This is the whistleblower. He used to work for the firm Enzyme Peak. And he came out a couple years ago and turned over like info to the IRS because he didn't feel the church was up and up on a lot of things. So they actually interviewed him. So this was the first time he's been like interviewed on TV.
Yeah.
So I guess that's kind of what made it a big deal. I don't think after watching it, I was like, well, that wasn't really anything like new. Not like new information. Like, what? He said what? It was all things that he'd already said that we'd already heard about. Not that doesn't mean that they're important.
Yeah.
But it was really interesting. After watching it, like I said, it was like a 15-minute segment. I watched it last weekend. I really didn't think it would go far, but like you said, it just really picked up this week.
There were tons of articles on it this week.
Knowing that we were going to have to podcast this week, I'm like, oh my gosh, I had to read like 6 articles on
this.
Because there were just so many discussions
and perspectives.
And it was actually really good for me to read all the articles because I grabbed little tidbits from all of them.
Okay, so tell me what your highlights are.
Okay, so first article will hit Deseret News. They, of course, had an opinion piece after basically just saying this is not a big deal. We all knew this.
Yeah.
The church is fine. They can, because there were kind of 3 things he talked about in this 60-minute segment. The first thing he talked about was just how wealthy the church is.
Yes.
$150 billion. We've heard that number the past couple of years thrown around. And he just, this whistleblower just didn't feel right to have that much billion versus what is actually being spent on charity per year. He just felt really a lot of turmoil about that. And another thing that came up was the church has a life insurance arm.
Beneficial
life. And during the financial crisis
in 2008, they had to prop it up.
There was a bailout from Enzyme Peak to that. And so he didn't feel like that was all on the up and up because that's a for-profit commercial company being bailed out. Anyway, so there was that. And then the SEC thing was mentioned briefly. And then they also had Bishop Waddell on there of,
who did a really good job denying.
Yeah.
Not denying. He didn't deny, sidestepping.
Yeah.
He sidestepped.
He sidestepped. I will say he didn't come off as good as he could have, but it wasn't awful.
I think the church PR people prepped him well for questions and how to sidestep. He didn't seem caught off guard by any of the questions, and he seemed to have a really good
kind of
response.
But I feel like there were a few where he did. It did. I thought the opposite. I thought there were
really.
I thought there were a couple questions.
Okay.
Where it felt like an awkward sidestep.
Okay. Fair enough.
I don't know. It's all in perception, right? Anyway, so Deseret News, of course, came out in their opinion piece, full force, like, this is not a big deal, blah, blah, blah. And then the Tribune, of course, came out in their opinion piece, Jana Reese, this is a big deal. And here's why it's a big deal. Blah, blah, blah. And then what else did we have? Oh, the church released a statement.
They released their own statement.
They released their own statement.
After a couple of days of articles.
Yes. They're like, oh, now we got to say something. People are paying attention. So they released a statement saying they believe in being financially responsible and, using these tithes to fulfill divine purposes. Blah, blah, blah. So then we have Sam Brunson with By Common Consent, who I really genuinely typically like his articles. He said kind of same, not a lot of new info. He talked a little bit about the bailout, but, acknowledged that, these are legit concerns. And then I really liked, there was another blog that Twim posted up on their Facebook this week. I had never heard of it before. It's called Thoughts from a Tamed Cynic. And the author was Nate Oman. And he really kind of dived into, and this was the question I had after watching it. My husband and I had this exact conversation after we watched it, because I've worked for a nonprofit before. I realize it is very normal to invest your money.
Yes.
Your charitable donations, you have an endowment fund, you invest some so it can grow.
And you spend some for your purposes.
Because you got to have some in savings.
Yeah.
Every nonprofit does that.
Shouldn't we all be doing that in our personal finance?
But the question was, well, how much does your average nonprofit spend of that, right? How much is normal to save and spend? Not that it's the church. It can do what it wants. This is all optional, right? But you are a church. So there are expectations. Yeah. People have expectations for their money. So this guy, Nate Oman, broke it down. I thought a really good way to wrap my head around it, because all these numbers have been thrown out this week. And I loved how he wrote this, because he acknowledged, I'm going to break this down, but let's acknowledge here that all of these numbers are speculation. And part of that is because the problem with this is we don't have solid numbers, because the church hasn't been super transparent on this.
Very true.
I'm going to break this down the best I can, but there are issues because we don't have good info. So, and this came up on 60 Minutes. They say $7 billion every year. We take in $7 billion from tithing. This guy, Nate Oman, said that based on all the articles and everything he's been able to gather over the past few years, we probably spend $6 billion a year on maintaining the church, maintaining the temples, and humanitarian aid. So part of that is directly for church members, and part of that is outside of the church. We're giving to not members. We're trying to make the world better. And then $1 billion goes into savings. So of that $7 billion, $6 billion gets spent. $1 billion goes into savings every year. Just $1 billion.
It's not like it's real money.
Anyway, but this was interesting. He broke it down, and he looked at most universities' endowment funds or, big charitable foundation endowment funds. Most of them are taking about 4 to 5%, spending about 4 to 5% per year. And if you do that, it's generally thought you can maintain your reserves
and your endowment fund,
and you can spend 4 to 5% a year. Well, he did this math on if there's 150 billion and we're spending $6 billion a year, that's about 4%. Now I think we're missing $1 billion there because $1 billion is going into anyway.
Yeah.
But he also acknowledged, like, this is kind of simplified.
Yeah.
It's a lot more complicated than that.
In the real world.
Yeah, there's different funds and there's different things. Anyway, but it was interesting. But the thing I love the most is he was like, but we don't have good numbers. And this was my takeaway after reading all of these articles. Okay, there's one more thing that is interesting to look at that we'll put in the notes.
Okay.
There is a website called Visual Capitalist.
Okay.
Is the name of the website. My husband saw this somewhere, and it was just a super interesting infographic. Visual Capitalist, and they have an infographic up there on the biggest endowments in the world.
Oh.
And so the church is the biggest at 150 billion. And then you go down from there in like the 70, 80 billion range is like Stanford, Harvard.
Oh.
And then it breaks it down and it goes down from there. And you can see this little infographic with who has the biggest endowment funds. And most of them are universities.
Yeah.
Some are like the Getty Foundation, which runs the museum.
Yeah.
And then there are like a couple government type things from other countries and a couple other churches. The only other churches that were on there were Church of England.
The Queen's Church.
Yes, I believe the Catholic Church was on there. And then there was some other, I didn't recognize it. It looked like a fund for some type of Christian.
Oh, interesting.
Anyway, it was really interesting graphic. But here's my takeaway.
Okay.
After reading all these articles and being just surrounded by this for a week, is I really think that it would be so great if we could just get more info from the church. Because I think where they're running into a problem with the media, because a lot of people are like, oh, the media is just like, so biased. And the media is just like being so mean to them just because they're the church. And everybody's obsessed with their finances because it's the church.
They're picking on us.
Well, here's the thing. I feel like if they were more open and they weren't like making secret accounts to hide money, if they just laid it out all on the table and didn't care what people thought, there would be nothing to see. I feel like this is like when a celebrity has a baby and they don't want the tabloids to get paid for taking a picture of the baby.
The tabloids become even more obsessed with the baby.
Yes. So what they do is they take their own picture of the baby and they spread it to the world.
Exactly.
And then nobody makes money off their baby. Exactly. I feel like if the church would just be like, here it is, you guys. This is how much we have. This is how much we're spending every year. And if you don't like it, we don't care. I think they just need to own it.
I think there is some legitimacy in that. The only thing that I think of, at least from a legal standpoint, is again, as a lawyer, I'm thinking, okay, would this invite more lawsuits for people to say, oh, you're a wealthy church. We're going to, think of a billion different ways to sue you. But that cat's probably out of the bag.
That ship has sailed because we're on the top of that infographic. And we are on the top by a very wide margin.
By a large margin.
So, and I'm just like, you know what? If they're worried about the members not paying tithing or the members being like disillusioned with what they're doing with the money, then like just deal with the consequence, right? Either change what you're doing with the money or be like, well, if they're not going to be faithful, they're not going to be faithful.
True.
Like
they do with, anything else where it's our choice, what we're going to do.
Let the coins fall and like maybe have a little bit of trust that like there are plenty of members that have no issues with this.
It's very true.
And there are many that do. And they're going to have to grapple with that, which is like not unusual for many church topics.
Very true.
So, and the media already hates you. So why are we trying to like pan to the media?
Exactly.
Like, why are we trying to make them write good things about us? They're not going to say anything good no matter what. So just own it and be like, who cares? We're church. We can do what we want.
Okay.
Or if you're ashamed of it, then maybe take a look at it and say, what could we do that's better?
What could we do
with
different?
This money? Should we spend more?
Yeah.
So I don't know.
I don't know either. All right. Should we move on to something else?
Yes, we should. I'm tired of reading about church financials.
Okay. Well, we talked, I can't remember if it was last month or the month before, that BYU Provo got a new president, or at least their new president was taking over July 1st. Well, not to be outdone, BYU-Idaho was like, well, if BYU Provo gets a new president, we get a new president.
They must be on the same schedule.
I don't know. Or they're like, we'll see your president and raise you one. So their president, who has been Henry J. Eyring, he is being replaced as of August 1st, and they made the announcement just this week. And he is being replaced with a gentleman by the name of Elder Alvin F. Meredith III, who, quite honestly, I'd never even heard of. So there is an article. It was, I believe it was in the, I can't remember if it was in the Deseret News or if it was in the Church News. Anyway, President Eyring had actually only met the soon-to-be President Meredith on one occasion. President Meredith had shown up to help President Eyring reorganize a stake in Rexburg.
And it was recently.
And so, anyway, so on Tuesday, May 16th, Elder D. Todd Christofferson showed up at BYU-Idaho and said, guess what? Come August 18th, you're getting a new president. So Elder Meredith actually has not been a general authority for very long. He was sustained on April 3rd, 2021 as a general authority 70.
So he's only had a couple of years.
He's only had a couple of years, and he's actually...
He looks young.
Well, How old is he? He was born in 1970. So that makes him like in his early 50s. And so his background is... first of all, he grew up in Tennessee. He served a full-time mission in the Utah Salt Lake City mission, which I think that's kind of hilarious. He got a bachelor's degree in psychology from BYU, and then he got a master's of business administration in 2001 from the University of Chicago. So he's only been out of school 20 years. He hasn't been out of school that long. Anyway, he and his wife have 6 kids. 3 of them are adults. 3 of them are still at home. And their youngest is a 13-year-old. And what he did for employment, he was a senior executive of a global technology firm. It did not say which one. He also served as a mission president. And so I am kind of guessing he got his education, he got out, he made a bunch of money.
Paid off the loans,
and then got this call to be a mission president, was a mission president for a while, and then got called to be the president of BYU-Idaho. So he doesn't have this background in academia like the new president of BYU Provo does, because if you recall, he's a statistics professor at BYU. So
this will be interesting.
This will be very interesting.
Also, will he bring in the caffeine?
Do we still not have caffeine in Rexburg?
I think they still don't have caffeine there. And will he allow shorts?
That's true. I know they have a different dress code in Rexburg.
I feel like this could be the guy. Come on.
Maybe.
Let's do it.
We'll have to see.
Because I have daughters who for reals are like, oh, I won't go there. You can't wear shorts. Like that is the deciding factor on them being like, nope, won't go there.
Okay. I'm sorry. I have to say I respect that.
I
can't blame him either. If I were faced with that similar choice, I'd be like, yeah, peace out. Not going there. I'll do Pathways online where I can wear what I want.
Anyway, okay, so we have some temple news. We finally have a date for the rededication of the St. George, Utah temple. So they're going to have an open house starting September 15th and running through November 11th. So almost a good 2 months.
Almost a good solid 2 months.
And then it will be dedicated December 10th of this year. So that's exciting. Other temple news, the Helena, Montana temple.
Which is, I think, almost done, isn't it?
Yeah, it's done because their open house, I think it's getting dedicated in June, which means its open house might be now. But there is a whole article on LDS Living about this temple. Something unique about this temple is, the open house is going now through June 3rd.
Okay.
But something unique about this temple is this is the first modular temple
Which
to
I
be
had
built.
no idea they were doing modular temples.
Me neither. So this is...
So explain the modular temple.
It's like a Lego set. This is a Lego temple. That's how I'm thinking of it anyways. So they build these walls in a factory in Alabama that specializes in modular stuff.
Okay.
So this
says... So they send their design plans to Alabama and say,
the design plans.
Give me a wall.
They made 25 prefab pieces in Alabama, wrapped them up tight, shipped them to Montana, and then put them together. And then, of course, this was interesting because they said the challenge will be making the exterior and the interior architectural design equal in quality to the non-modular ones, right? You don't want this to look like a manufactured home version of a temple. But they said it can be achieved, but it takes attention to architectural details. So then they have to go in and finish it and make it look unique.
Do some finished carpentry on the inside.
This was an experiment, it sounds like, but they're experimenting with this because they said some of the reasons they're experimenting with this is just the volume of temples. Like they're just saying we can't spend, 6 or 7 years getting a temple built. If we're going to keep up with President Nelson.
Well, they're not wrong about that.
Obviously a cost thing. So they tried it out on this one. I don't know if the article didn't say if there are plans to use this on other ones.
And I think the Helena one, isn't that a pretty small temple that they were doing?
It's 10,000 square feet.
Yeah, that's a pretty small temple. One. And there's a bunch of those smaller ones. For example, I think the Burley one we're getting is pretty small. And there's one in, I think, Elko, Nevada that's slated to be pretty small. So
that's
maybe
kind of what
try these with smaller
I think
temples.
that's what they're looking at it for, the smaller ones. So it'll be interesting to see how many they use it on.
Exactly.
Clearly it worked. It's opening next month.
Exactly. And I wonder if they're going to start manufacturing other ones, or they're going to be like, well, let's see how this works. Let's see in a couple of years whether we're still happy with this.
Yeah, if they're going to let it sit for a while. Yeah, it'll be interesting. Okay, so then we got a statement this week on President Nelson's health.
He showed up with a walker.
Which you can't do that in this church without people noticing. If someone comes to conference and they sit in a chair, have a cane or a walker, it is like all over the talk. Yes. So he released a statement, a personal statement. He said, "You may have heard a rumor that someone saw me somewhere using a walker or a wheelchair. Well, it is not a rumor." He said, "From time to time, I'm having a little challenge with my balance. I guess I shouldn't be surprised when little issues arise as I near the century mark."
And then he's 98.
Yeah, I mean, this is normal. Then he said, "Little challenges with balance should be the least of our worries. Onward and upward." Typical President Nelson fashion.
President Nelson. Well, and again, let's go ode to transparency here. Since we have been talking about transparency, is rather than just let this simmer with people going, I saw him, he had a walker. I saw him, he had a walker. He's like, hey, look, I got a walker. Here's a picture of me with my walker. Here's where I got the walker. Now quit talking about it.
Yeah.
Okay, so next story. This is another Jana Reese. We got 2 Jana Reeses this month. We have the one on 60 Minutes, and then this is one she did spotlighting the Mormon moment of 10 years ago. So you may remember where we were at a little over 10 years ago. Mitt Romney was running for president. Book of Mormon musical was a hit on Broadway, and then the infamous I'm a Mormon campaign, which is seemingly a little dated now since we're no longer Mormons.
That seems a long time ago.
I know.
A lot has happened in 10 years.
A lot has happened in 10 years. So 2 people that were quite vocal 10 years ago were Joanna Brooks, and she wrote a book entitled Book of Mormon Girl. And she had a regular column that she wrote that was published on the internet, and she had kind of a lot to say about the Mormon moment, and a lot of media would come to her. She never said, hey, I'm an authorized spokesman for the church. She's never said that. She's just like, I'm just a member. I grew up. I have questioned my leaders, but I still believe, sort of a thing. And she was getting a lot of press 10 years ago.
But lots of feminists.
Lots of feminist stuff. And then Mitch Main, who was an LGBTQ ally, and he was getting a lot of press 10 years ago. So Jana Reese interviewed both of them to say kind of a, where are you now sort of a thing, because we really haven't heard from either one of them in a really long time.
When I saw this article, I was like, oh my gosh, I forgot about Joanna Brooks. I want to know where she is now.
Exactly. So anyway, so she talks in the article a little bit about some of her favorite moments from that time in the spotlight, and how she was trying to help the media understand this religion that to some in the media was kind of a little unintelligible. And since that time, she has kind of stepped back, and she said, it was never my intent to be the voice. Mm-hmm. It was my intent to raise awareness and help other people learn how to be a voice as well, so that we could collectively join our voices. And she also talks about her blog that she had, and she said the church sent out a survey to thousands of members trying to gauge how many people were reading my column in Religion Dispatches. The internet was so new, they assumed if something was published online, it must have enormous reach. Because she does talk about how she became aware that higher ups, general authorities, were aware of her and had referenced her in various kind of church meetings and stuff. Then they go on to ask her and Mitch Main as well about what we lovingly call the leadership lottery.
This is exactly what I wanted to know. When I read the headline, I was like, oh, did they get in trouble?
So she said at the time that all of this was going on 10 years ago that she had a really good bishop. And he just really didn't let anything ruffle him. But she said a few years later, she had a bishop that she felt like took out some resentment on her 12-year-old daughter. Her 12-year-old daughter had gone in for a Temple Recommend interview. Joanna was in there with her. The bishop had asked the question about, do you associate with any groups opposed to the church? And the 12-year-old daughter said no. And according to Joanna, the bishop said, well, that's not true because your dad is Jewish. And we all know the Jews are opposed to the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Yikes.
Well, that didn't go over so well. And Joanna says her daughter explained to him, no, they're not opposed. And she said, her daughter knows how to understand God in 2 languages. And she had talked about this before in the past, that they were raising their kids, both Mormon and Jewish, and kind of letting them decide, where they wanted to go. She has subsequently kind of stepped back from the church. She says, I don't attend. She's still a member. She still believes. She said, my faith continues. And she's trying to find new ways to express her love and gratitude for the amazing experience of being a Mormon. But she's just kind of not active in the way that she was before. Mitch Main, he had actually served as an executive secretary in a bishopric, and he actually has stepped back as well.
As an openly gay person.
As an openly gay person.
One of the first, I think, that we ever heard about.
Exactly. And he's kind of subsequently stepped back as well. He now has a boyfriend and that he is in love with. And so that probably kind of makes it very challenging to be active. But it was an interesting follow-up piece on both of them. And I appreciated kind of knowing where they are today and what they're doing. And especially because, like I said, they got a lot of press 10 years or so ago.
Yeah. So. Interesting. Okay. Next article we have is a Ken Jennings. He just keeps popping up on game shows. He went on Wheel of Fortune.
Okay, did you realize our brother served in the same mission with Ken Jennings?
No. Did he know him?
He knew him. They were never companions, but they were in the same mission together.
No, I had no idea.
Anyway, I can't believe I never mentioned that.
No, I did not realize. So Ken Jennings and Mayim Balak. I always mess up her name.
I know.
Who I'm talking about.
The Blossom Girl.
Mayim Balak.
Yes.
They both went on Wheel of Fortune, also with Vanna White. It was Celebrity Wheel of Fortune. So
meanwhile, the two of them are battering back and forth, and Vanna's in the middle going, I can't get a word in edgewise.
Poor Vanna didn't do great, which you'd think she'd have the upper hand from all of her years.
No.
But no, the smarty pants. So anyway, they both did great. They raised a lot of money. I'm assuming this is for charity.
Yes, it was for charity.
So,
well, what I thought was so funny is the Blossom Girl, Mayim Balak, she kicked his butt in the first round.
Yeah.
And then he figured out the buzzer situation, because that was always his key on Jeopardy, is he was fast on the buzzer. So he figured out the buzzer situation.
He had to get his groove. And then
he kicked her butt in the second round.
Yes. So anyway, he said he loved it. It was always a dream.
And they had a really good, it said that they had, that he and, that they had a really good chemistry back and forth between the two of them. And you can see why they get along so well, being co-Jeopardy hosts.
Yeah. So,
All right. I think mine is next. I love rodeo. We've talked about rodeo a lot on here. There was a Mother's Day piece in the Deseret News by Trent Troon, and he interviewed this professional barrel racer who talks about learning from the strong women in her family. And she's 41. She lives in Oklahoma. And she's a nurse, and she has a couple daughters, and she actually races professionally. She's competed at many high-level associations. She's a 3-time qualifier for the National Finals Rodeo. And one of the things that she really talks about in this article is she talks about how strong her mother was and how she really learned from her mother a really strength of being strong, driven, and hardworking and determined, and that she's hoping to pass those qualities on to her 2 daughters, which are 14 and 12, and just how she balances being a nurse, being a mom, and being a professional barrel racer.
I feel like we have a lot of rodeo stars that are LDS.
I
mean, that must just be a Western United States thing.
Yeah, no, seriously, there are.
I feel like every couple months we have a rodeo star popping
in the rodeo circuit. We got a lot of members of the church, who are out there doing amazing things.
Okay, this next article was a LDS Living, right? About the man who makes the puzzles, Dowdle. Had you heard of Dowdle Puzzles?
Yeah, well, I'd heard of Eric Dowdle because Eric Dowdle actually was born here in Boise. He subsequently moved to Wyoming at some period of time, but he was in my husband's ward growing up. So my husband knew him before he became the famous artist that he was or is.
Anyway,
he's
an artist, folk
he
art.
Has a show on Magnolia Network.
I didn't know he had a show until I read this article, but he has a show called The Peacemaker where he visits different cities in preparation to paint them and then eventually turn the paintings into puzzles. I was not familiar with his puzzles until COVID, when we did a lot of puzzles.
And he said he had exceptional growth in COVID of his puzzles for that very reason.
We borrowed some from friends, and then they're all over at the library if you go check them out. But they also sell them all the time at Costco. So.
Yes, that Costco has been a major contract for him to sell his puzzles.
Anyway, I had no idea he was LDS, but the Puzzle Man is LDS. So if you want to read more about him,
if you like his artwork, he is folk art, and it's really it's very fun to look at.
It's really cool. Lots of details.
Yep.
Hard puzzles.
Which again makes his puzzles even more fun.
Yeah.
So, all right. I think we're done with news stories. We are going to move on to this segment known as Mormons Behaving Badly.
Uh-oh.
Oh, these Mormons. We got another murder. Because, so of course we had Lori Vallow, and then a couple months ago we talked about the dentist in Colorado who offed his wife.
I forgot about him.
Now we have a real estate person in Park City who offed her husband. So I don't believe they were actually active because she offed him by putting fentanyl in what's known as a Moscow Mule, which is an alcoholic drink. But I read his obituary. He grew up LDS. He served a mission. It didn't say,
was she LDS at one point?
It didn't say if she was ever LDS or what her status was. But obviously they're Mormon or Mormon adjacent.
They were at one time.
And as long as you are Mormon adjacent, that qualifies you for Mormons behaving badly. So what had happened is, and more information came out today. So what had happened was she had taken out some loans against a house without telling him. She'd stripped money out of their account without telling him. And so she was like really, really deeply in debt because of some financial choices that she made that she hid from him. She ended up taking out $2 million in life insurance against him that he didn't know about, in addition to a policy he already had. He was suspicious that she might be poisoning him based on some prior things that had happened. So he went in and he changed his life insurance policy to his sister and didn't tell his wife. So she only got a fraction of the money on his death that she thought she was going to get.
I feel like this is a common thing you hear in like so many Dateline episodes. He told a family member, if something happens, have we not heard this in so many of these stories?
We have.
Red flag, red flag. If you're the family member and someone comes to you, you just need to scoop that person up and be like, sorry, I'm kidnapping you. You're not going home.
Exactly. Exactly.
Oh, it's so scary.
So she kills him with this fentanyl, and they had 2 young children. And then, and there were some suspicions at first, and the cops were investigating it. But she goes on to write this book. And so she writes this book that she became really well known for.
Children's book.
A children's book on grief entitled, Are You With Me? And she was working on a second book called How Far Away is Heaven, when she was arrested for his murder.
No shame.
No shame whatsoever.
That's awful.
So again, I am envisioning Keith Morrison, Dateline, going to come knocking on the door.
Oh, yeah.
This is a Dateline episode in the making.
Yes. Although at least this one doesn't have any kooky church stories associated with it. Hopefully.
Maybe we can, Utah is adjacent enough to East Idaho. Maybe we can send Nate Eaton down there to cover this so I can get my Nate Eaton fix.
Oh, dear.
Okay. Well, let's move on to favorite things.
We do favorite things? Okay, I have 2 this week. One is a mini one because this only applies to people that live in Boise, which I know is like a small percentage, so I'll go fast. If you live in Boise, there is a new gelati place, which is like
really
custard and Italian ice that is from Rexburg that is opening tomorrow, and it is delicious.
I take it you've had this when you visited Rexburg.
I have had this. Actually, they also have one in Logan. I had it 2 years ago when we went to Bear Lake and we went through Logan because my Rexburg friends told me you must.
Okay, good.
I have been dreaming of this gelati for 2 years.
Okay, so what is it called and where is it located?
It's called Carrie Ann's.
Okay.
And they're finally opening one up in Boise. It's like a food truck.
Okay.
For custard and Italian ice.
Okay.
And it's going to be on up on Maple Grove.
So is the food truck moving?
No, or is it going to be there permanently all summer? Okay. But they're seasonal. They only do summer.
Okay.
So if you're in Boise, you must try it. Carrie Ann's.
Well, I'm going to have to try that.
Okay. But my most favorite thing of the month is a recipe that I've had for a couple years now, but I've never shared it. But I was making it this week and I was like, well, we need to share this. The world has to have this recipe. This is a recipe my sister-in-law gave me a couple years ago for Chipotle chicken tacos. These are my favorite tacos in the entire world.
I think you gave me this recipe.
Did I give it to you?
Tell me what's in it.
To make from home. You grill it and you put this marinade on the chicken.
Oh, yes, I've done this.
It is so delicious.
This is delicious. It's very labor intensive, though.
It is, but it gets easier after you do it once or twice. Okay. But yeah, it's labor intensive. I have some hacks to make it easier.
Okay, well, you need to share your hacks.
But I just mix the because it calls for like a coleslaw and also a salsa. What do you call the chopped up salsa with tomatoes and the salsa fresca?
Pico de gallo?
Pico de gallo.
Okay.
I just mix those together and it just makes it easier. And there's like a crema fresh you put on top with sour cream and mayo and cumin. I just kind of guess. I don't like follow the recipe, and lime. You just throw a bunch of things together and it's good. The most important part is the marinade on this chicken.
I do admit the marinade is really, really good.
And there's a lot of things that go into this marinade. So you do have to pull out like lots of spices.
Oh yeah, it was like 10 things in the marinade.
Ketchup, mustard, like oil, like all the things. It is so worth it. Every winter I miss it because it's too cold to grill outside. And then when summer hits and I turn on the grill, this is the first thing we make. It's so good. So it is on Carl's Bad Cravings, which is like a food blog.
Okay.
Go to Carl's Bad Cravings and type in the search Chipotle chicken tacos.
Okay.
You will love them.
And I have to say, you know what? I've never grilled the chicken. I've done the recipe, but I think I end up just like throwing the chicken in my slow cooker with the marinade and cooking it that way.
You got to grill the chicken.
Okay. So maybe I'll have to try it by grilling the chicken. Okay.
Definitely.
But it's a good recipe. Okay. I brought my favorite thing tonight. We're going to have a taste test. So let me get down here so I can throw it up on the camera. It is the s'more Oreo. Now, I love myself a good Oreo. A s'more is one of my favorite things.
I can't believe they haven't done this flavor yet.
I think that they have done it before. I think I have seen it before.
Maybe it's just a summer thing.
I think it's a summer thing, but I think it's a little different than what I've seen before. And I'll explain to you why I think it's different from what I've seen before. Because first of all, I love a graham cracker cookie. I love chocolate. I love marshmallow. The only thing you could add to this to make it more divine would be peanut butter. So anyway, here it is. I'm going to open the cookie up. I'm going to hand you a cookie.
Okay.
I'm going to take a cookie. So if you look at the cookie, I'm just going to separate out the cookie. Like one side of it is one side of it is the marshmallow, and one side of it is the chocolate, and it is a graham cookie. Are you looking it up to see if
No.
they've done it before in the past? Anyway, it seemed like when I ate the first one tonight that there was a little bit more marshmallow than there had been in the past. And anyway, so the s'mores Oreo cookie for the summer.
I like it.
I like it too.
It's way better than, I have tried some funky Oreo flavors in my day because that's Oreo's favorite thing to do, right?
Exactly.
And I'm a sucker. We're all suckers. Who can resist a new Oreo flavor? This is definitely one of their better ones because some of them taste really processed. And
yeah. Well, they have another one that I like that's also a graham cookie, and it has peanut butter and chocolate in it. And it is really good. And it's not a seasonal flavor. It is one that they carry all the time. I've almost forgiven them they have the golden Oreos, which are the vanilla cookie.
I love those ones.
I do too. And they used to have it with a chocolate filling, and they no longer have it with a chocolate filling. And I've never forgiven them for taking away the chocolate filling because I don't want my vanilla cookie with a vanilla filling. I want my vanilla cookie with a chocolate filling. So
that's definitely one of their better variations.
So this is my favorite thing for the month is go find yourself some more Oreos and try them.
Don't be scared, even if you've been burned on an Oreo before.
And it's a lot less messy than actually like going and doing a s'more.
Yeah, I do love a s'more though.
Well, I think that about wraps it up for us tonight, Twim Nation. Thank you so much for joining us. If you have any comments, you can reach out at contact@thisweekinmormons.com, and we will open our mailbag and sort through our comments and respond to you. You can also find Twim on all the social media pages. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Twim Sisters. We have our own Instagram account where we post fun stuff. So please reach out to us. And as always, if you want to be a true supporter, please join Patreon. $3 a month. Kurt throws in some extra content for the Patreon subscribers, and you get the episodes early.
All right. Thanks for listening.